I don't know about you, but this time of the year, I feel the weight of the darkness and the shorter days. Yesterday was the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of light of the year. And the symbolism between light and darkness is really part of the human story. It's very intuitive to us. Think about it. Almost all of our successful blockbuster movies, they're built on this whole premise of a tension, a battle between darkness and light. Some big ones from recent times would be The Lord of the Rings. The main character is given a light to battle the darkness of the evil monster Mordor. Or Harry Potter. His positive light energy battles the darkness of Voldemort. And of course, Star Wars. The Jedi use lightsabers to work for the light side, tapping into the Force to battle the darkness of the Sith. The iconic quote of the villain Darth Vader to Luke is, "Give yourself to the dark side." And my niece's favorite, Frozen, where Elsa's power of sparkling light is used for good against the darkness of eternal winter. These stories work because they tap into something deep in the human psyche, our own battle between darkness and light. Long before the blockbusters, the Bible is filled with imagery around darkness and light. The prophet Isaiah in the Old Testament spoke of a coming Messiah, saying, "The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of deep darkness, a light has dawned." And Jesus uses the imagery of light and darkness throughout his entire ministry, saying, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." And also, "While I am in the world, I am the light of the world." And again later, in John says, you are going to have the light for a little longer. Walk while you have the light before the darkness overtakes you. And he tells us, "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden." So this battle between light and darkness is baked within our scriptures. Early Christians saw this connection about darkness and light and the calendar. So it's understood that the early Christians in about 336 AD chose December 25th for Christmas because that date related to the darkest day of the year, with a promise that light would ultimately defeat darkness. And they were very, very good cultural translators. They matched the date to a century-old Roman pagan festival called Sol Invictus, meaning unconquered sun, which celebrated that the sun would beat out the darkness on winter solstice. So the Christians always saw Jesus as the light coming into the world, overcoming darkness. And Christmas as a time of the year that we're finishing Advent, we're coming to Christmas, it's so important because it celebrates the time in the history of the world that the light was not overcome by darkness. Jesus came as light in the world at a time when humanity was so dark and so far from God that the ability to choose light was being lost. Jesus' birth and life gives all of us an option of choosing light over darkness in our own lives. Swedenborg spoke about the deeper symbolic meaning of light as representing truth that is emanating from God, giving an image of that energy coming from God like the energy of the sun. It is always coming, but there are times when we don't feel it. There are times when we're blocked from it, but the love and the truth are constant. He also describes in heaven, there's different degrees of light as you grow more spiritually. While darkness, he says, represents those who are unaware of God's love and wisdom. Darkness, like evil, is not created by God. It is a factor of our turning away. In hell, he describes people in spiritual darkness because they have focused on selfishness and materialism. But periods of spiritual darkness in our lives and spiritual struggle, these what we often call temptations, they are a critical part of our life. They are part of our life cycle. They are natural. Our spiritual work is to overcome these times of darkness. Our purpose on earth is to regenerate or grow spiritually, moving from dark unawareness and ignorance toward the light of truth, provided by God's guidance and our willingness to change. We get to choose light or darkness. I have to say, living now, I'm in DC, right? So this time of year, it gets very cold. It's been very cold lately and very dark. And I have to say, it really weighs on me. Just going out is a chore. I tend to eat more, and I eat like more hearty foods, and I exercise less. And this environment conspires with our bodies to kind of slow down. I kind of want to stay in bed and rest and turn inward in the darkness. And then add to that, our bodies are kind of feeling, I just want to sleep, I want to hibernate. And then what's the schedule like? Well, the schedule at the end of the year, generally, I don't know about you, but for me, it's like, did you get your work done? Did you close things out? Did you respond to party invitations? Did you send the card? Did you buy the gift? Did you get the ticket? Are you ready for the drive? And for those with family, it can be surprisingly stressful. And for those who don't, it can be really sad not to have Christmas with anyone. So it has a mix itself. And particularly at holidays, memories of loved ones that are past are with us. I know for me personally, I'm feeling coming to the end of the year is a bit like running the end of a marathon. The grief involved with selling the church and my own personal loss with my dad, plus my day-to-day task list, makes me feel exhausted and fatigued. The darkness and the cold, they just enhance it. So I can really feel in myself that tension, that desire to hibernate, just turn within. And it's harder to see light when you feel that darkness. So what can we do about it? What can we do about it? How do we bring light into darkness? Well, I know that our Holy City community loves spiritual practices. So I thought, what would be spiritual practices? And as I thought about it, I realized that the same lessons that we learn from the physical world apply to the spiritual world. So what do we do when we have too much darkness in our physical life and we don't have light? Well, I think one of the things we do is we maximize natural light. We open the windows, we light candles, we build fireplaces. In the same way, spiritually, we can increase our spiritual light by reading scripture and watching your favorite sermons of mine. Just kidding. But taking quiet walks for introspection, journaling daily. And if you're not a journaler, just starting your day by writing three things that you're grateful for can completely shift from darkness to light, because we all have so much to be grateful for. Now, physically in dark times, we can exercise by enjoying winter sports and going out for a walk. If you walk in the cold, it boosts your endorphins. In the same way, spiritually, we can get outside of ourselves, pushing past our comfort zone by reaching out to others in need and seeing how we can support them. Physically, in dark times, we can get cozy and play indoor games. In the same way, spiritually, we can engage playfully in a dialogue with God, turn on some fun music, or dig into a really good spiritual book. Physically, in dark times, we enjoy traditions with family and friends. And in the same way, spiritually, we here are part of a faith community, and we join each other for evening prayer, supporting each other. We know that this has a huge impact on people's psyche and psychology of being part of a faith community. It's really one of the best ways to build resilience. When we're not in community, we can light a candle for ourselves to focus our meditation and create a ritual at home. And of course, physically, when it gets really cold and dark, a lot of people travel to other places. I know a number of our members have traveled to warm, bright places. In the same way, spiritually, we can do the same thing. We can recognize that when we're filled with negative thoughts and even depressing thoughts, we can use the strategies today to travel to a new spiritual location. We can actually move from a hellish community to a heavenly community simply by asking God's help and engaging in these practices. In times of spiritual darkness, we can remind ourselves that the dark times are periods of spiritual transformation, recognizing that life, like the earth, has cycles. There will be warm days, there will be cold days, there will be different parts of our life, different cycles, that wherever we are is not where we stay. We can know that in the dark times, we're doing our work of overcoming challenges towards spiritual growth. And it reminds us to let go of the illusion that we can control everything. With God's help, we can shift from darkness to light. Now, I know of no other human being who personified this struggle and this wrestling better or more prominently with overcoming the darkness than Helen Keller. And she wrote a book originally called My Religion, but in more recently titled Light in My Darkness, where she shows how Swedenborg's insight fostered in her a spiritual life of learning, and learning that there's a loving God, that there's an immortality of the soul, and there's an interconnectedness of life. And she reflects on how these beliefs brought her peace, brought her purpose, and a profound sense of light in her darkness, and in a very physically dark and silent world. It'd be a good book to pick up sometime if you haven't read it. Like Helen Keller, also Mary, Jesus' mother, is just another example. She gets the word that the light is coming to the world through her, and that she gets a chance to be a reflection of God's light. She has that beautiful line, "My soul magnifies the Lord." Like Mary, in dark times, we get to choose to be vessels of light. The world, our world, desperately needs us to make the move from darkness to service. God transforms humanity through other humans. God is relying on us to accept our role to become spiritual reflections of the light in a dark world. When we surrender ourselves to God's greatest purpose of our lives, we not only move from darkness to light, but we can play a leadership role in a troubled world to bring light and overcome darkness. Because as Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King preached so profoundly, darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. This Christmas season, we face our times of darkness. We can find peace knowing that the light will come and the light wins out. As the Gospel of John reminds us, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. Amen. Thoughts, comments, questions about light and darkness? How are y'all doing with the light and the darkness?
Well, I guess to put a positive spin on it, Rich, starting today, every day will be longer until the fourth week of June. But it's interesting. I guess people react differently. For me, this was the perfect day to be out and walking. I mean, it was brisk, senses come alive. There was a book recently published, I don't remember by whom, about a year spent, I guess, north of the Arctic Circle in Scandinavia. It was a scientist who had been assigned there. And she found that all the residents had discovered ways of embracing the darkness, and they had somehow turned it into a very positive experience by engaging in activities which had the effect of, at least psychologically, dispersing the darkness.
Beautiful, beautiful examples. And I think, Malcolm, your ability to exercise in 26-degree weather is why you'll outlive all of us, because it is proven. Yeah, it's great for your body to do it, I can't say I'm excited about it, but I'm glad that you are, and that's a good role model for us. I also like how you always look on the positive side. That's awesome.
Well, I think the Scandinavians call this time of the year and those traditions that Malcolm was talking about. I can't pronounce it, but it's the Hygge, Hyggge. I think it's spelled that way. And it's just a time of coziness and actually embracing the darkness. Now, I myself have entered into the season of what's called Three Dog Nights up here in Canada. So, you have to have three dogs to keep yourself warm in bed at night. And it just reminds me so much of what my father used to, because he was a child of the Depression, and that was a very serious thing, sleeping in bed with the dogs to keep you warm. So, yeah, so we're into the season of Three Dog Nights.
Now we have all uncovered the mystery of what Three Dog Nights, secret meaning of it.
Yeah, and it works really well too.
I think that's a very likely strategy of other members of our community here too. I have a feeling, knowing their love for dogs and cats and pets.
Although I am short a dog, so.
Something I've been thinking about is, well, I mean, just I guess the past couple of days reflecting on the solstice is like the winter solstice is the shortest day of the year in the northern hemisphere, right? And that's why Christmas was chosen because those who were creating Christmas were living in the northern hemisphere. But what about people in the southern hemisphere? Like they still celebrate Christmas in December, even though wouldn't it be like the summer solstice for them because they have the opposite? um yeah, sort of seasons.
Yes, Kelly, I always like how you're always thinking about other people. Yeah, I think so. I think the interesting is the date got fixed. I don't think a lot of Christians even have any clue why that 25th is. I think they actually believe that that's historically what the date that Jesus was born, but it was chosen for a different purpose. And so the purpose, it's just interesting to know the history of it, that it was, light overcoming darkness. But that now has, I don't think any most Christians would even know that history, and now it's just like a universal date that everybody embraces. And I'm also sensitive to the fact that we have a global church. So I know what, as I said in the newsletter, as I'm talking, if you're living in Hawaii or in Florida right now, you're probably like, I don't know what he's talking about, because the days are beautiful because it's a crisp 65 degrees. So yeah, I think it does change wherever you are.
Yeah, interesting to think about.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks, Kelly.
I lived on Miami Beach for 3 years, and it can get cold. You can get down to freezing in Miami. I do remember that. And of course, out in the orange groves, they have to put out smudge pots to keep the frost and ice off the oranges. And so,
I've had struggles with depression for most of my younger years as an adult, and from time to time throughout my life. Um, this last week, I happened to run across a teacher that was speaking about the man being who was healed of his blindness in Jericho. Forgive me, I've forgotten his name. But Jesus said to him, "Your faith has made you well." And here I thought that it was Jesus' word or Jesus' touch. And I began to wonder, when I'm feeling down, how would I use my faith let that be a place where Jesus might help me, bless me, strengthen me, and so forth. The thing that has made most sense to me is that my faith allows me to look backwards and see how God has helped me in the past many, many times. And to trust that even though I might be feeling down right now, my faith is going to be a place that will turn that around. God will work through my faith. And I've had experiences where that's been possible in the past. And then I realized it's possible today. And for me to think in terms of what would it be like for me to choose joy today instead of sadness. And that has also been helpful. But those are all matters of faith in the absence of the healing hand of Jesus touching my heart and soul. Although I kind of wonder if he's not actually doing that for me then.
Yeah, great examples, Glenn, of pragmatic examples of how we can deal with depression or when the darkness comes over us. I've always felt, I agree with you. I think the older you get, right, the longer track record you can look back and say, this feels bad, but I got through this, so you have a track record. And I have always felt that's why it's so likely that teens will take their life that I've talked to, because there's no track record. There's no looking back. I know in a certain part of my life, I thought about taking my life because there's no way of looking. I was young and there's no track record. There really isn't a way to say, oh, I'll get through it. And so sometimes, if we've counseled young people, if we remember ourselves, like breaking up with a relationship could be like life threatening because it's like the end of the world. Like they were everything to me. And later they'll be like, I can't remember the person's name, but in that moment. So I do think that life gives us that ability to look back and you can see providence, divine providence working. So I think that's a great example of we've gotten through worse. That's good. And also I think for me at least, maybe one of the more controversial, I don't know if it's controversial, but one of the ideas of Swedenborg that I really find fascinating, but it doesn't jive with a lot of the world, is that he would say that when you're feeling that, you are under attack spiritually, so that there are dark forces engaging with you. And so sometimes even just acknowledging, look, I know who you guys are. I'm going to read the Lord's Prayer. I'm going to read the 23rd Psalm. I'm going to do all these other things, can shift you from that. It's like traveling to another environment. You can get out of that environment by, I think some of the things I try to say to like, by being of service to others can snap it. And, but I do think that their goal, and I would just say demonic presence, the goal is to just keep you going, spiraling down, down, down. And then when you feel bad about yourself, then they have another trick, which is to say, boy, look how dumb you are for being depressed now. So it's like, it's shame on top of like, they just kind of bring you down, 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 down. So I think that, yeah, I really appreciate what you said, Glenn. I think those are some ways we can shift and literally travel to a warmer climate and get into the light. So I appreciate that. Jose, I see your hand is up.
Sure. First, I love the sermon. I think about the idea of light and darkness in this time of year all the time. I was the risk of sounding like I'm proselytizing. It's known to the people who've heard me talk before. I'm a Freemason. My lodge last night had its annual installation, kind of its inauguration day. I was installed into a new position as an officer where my symbol is that on a collar that I wear around my neck is a square and compass with a sun inside. It's part of one of my new jobs for the coming year is going to be to open up the Bible on the altar to the Bible verse that represents the degree that we're working under on that day, and to light candles around the altar, two in the north, one on the south of the altar, because the north is a place of darkness and needs more light. In the northern hemisphere anyway, the sun is always a little bit more on the south. That's why, like Boy Scouts know, moss grows on the north side of trees, because it's always a place of relative shadow. place of darkness. We take a month off of having lodge meetings every year, and we refer to it as going dark. My lodge's motto is Ex tenebris lux, out of the darkness comes light. And we always refer to the idea of imparting knowledge to each other and brotherhood as being a source of light. And so there's all sorts of light and darkness motifs. The very reason that we have our installation ceremony at this time of year is because our law actually says you should have it as close to the feast day of St. John the Evangelist as possible, because it's December 27th and it's always right around the solstice, because it's the darkest point in the year. But as someone else mentioned, that means that the days are about to get longer. And so the idea of, light, disappearing temporarily, or at least getting more shadowy, but then always starting again in a new cycle, is always really important to us. Just a thought that I had from what you said. Over.
Well, thanks, Jose. I actually, because we're connected on Facebook, I got to see some of the pictures of that. I thought it was really awesome. And I think one thing I've appreciated in getting to know you in the church is that with the Masonic background, the Masons have a very deep symbolic understanding of things that's pretty much, I would say, somewhat lost in our culture. And I think it just dovetails so nicely with Swedenborg's metaphors and correspondences and connections. And it's another example where the the power of that image of light. It's, blockbuster movies, or it's the story of Jesus, and it's the story of your Masonic group too, which is based on a faith perspective. I believe that to be in it, you have to have some faith belief to be even part of it. So I appreciate you sharing that. It looked like a very special night, and I think it's it's just the way you're describing it. It sounds like the beginning of a church service, right, with the Bible and the lights and the thing. So yeah, I think you're providing a place for a community, probably for a lot of people who might not be that interested in organized traditional religions, but they're finding brotherhood and connection there. So thank you for sharing that. Katerina?
Rich, I wanted to clarify more on around the point that you made that Jesus was born at a low point for our humanity spiritually. If I heard and understood you correctly, I always thought we may be the most spiritually lost, maybe biased. But can you expand on that for us, please?
Yeah, just that, at least in our tradition, there's various cycles of the history of the world. And so if you go back to I did that Old Testament series where I went through, there was various cycles. There's an Adam cycle, there's a Noah cycle. And it seems to be humanity doesn't progress naturally up like we kind of imagine, like everything is just always getting better. But there's a cycle and there's a collapse. There's a collapse. And God is always seeking to keep a balance between light and darkness. You need some evil in the world to have free will. Otherwise, you always choose good. So you have to have it. But at that particular moment in history, the choice of good was being lost. The world had become so evil that there was no that. And so that's why God comes in the form of Jesus into the world to get things back on track of teaching of how you should live your life. And so when we say he saves the world, that's what it means. He saved that chance for us to have that choice. But that cycle has kept continuing. In Swedenborg's time, when he's writing, he's saying, boy, Christianity is collapsing again. And he writes in the 1700s, what we know is Christianity is going to devastate. It's going to fall apart in Europe first. Because it's lost, it's not connected to the Sermon on the Mount. It's not Jesus anymore. It's about empire. It's about killing people who have different beliefs, which we were doing as Christians, and says that there's going to be a new church, and that's why a New Jerusalem. So the name of our DC church is the Washington Society of the New Jerusalem, and it's kind of built on this premise that there's a light coming into the world very slowly. So. Yeah, so we can think of our time as particularly dangerous, I know that recently I was reading old sermons of mine, and it was like every sermon had kind of on the everyone was like, "Oh, well, this is a terrible time." Like, oh, and then the crisis that just happened, and the crisis didn't turn out to be all that. We got through it. So evidently, if you believe all this, that the time that we're in now is not as horrible as the moment when God came into the world. And evidently, that's never going to happen again physically, where God will come into the world physically again, despite a lot of churches believing that there will be a rapture and a destruction of earth. Jesus is coming into people's hearts right now. And so there's a big reflect, and there's an opportunity to really reflect. But I would say that church as we know it is being deconstructed, and it had to be, because it got very lost. And so we're hopefully part of what's new in a new church. So that's the theory behind it. That's the importance of Christmas and Christ's birth.
Thank you.
Yeah, I slipped a little theology into the sermon and you caught it. There you go. Anybody else? Roxanne, I see you. I wish to make sure that anybody else has a chance to jump in too. Any other questions or comments? Okay, Roxanne?
No, I just wanted to bring up, you talk about the darkness and lightness, and the Dark Ages were followed by the Renaissance. So um, certainly that wasn't all about religion, but just culturally, we moved from the Dark Ages and into that beautiful time of, especially in Italy, the Renaissance.
Yeah. Well, I kind of, I actually believe we're on the precipice of a very beautiful period in the world, and that we're shaking out all of our dark ages. We're shaking out a lot of the falsity in our church and our faith and a lot of our governments and so forth. I think we're on the precipice of something good. And I know that's not a very popular perspective, but that's just how I see it. So maybe maybe we are coming to a renaissance.
But that's perspective, Rich, of one of our recent readings in the Monday Reading Group, The Singularity is Nearer by Ray Kurzweil, who basically sees AI leading to an era in which human knowledge and human goodness fill the world. It's a very positive take on AI, by contrast, of course, with a lot of other interpretations. But certainly his book is very much aligned with your thought.
Yeah, I guess it's our choice what we decide to do. Good, or we can bring good, or we can bring more light or more darkness. It's really up to us.
It might be interesting if you develop that topic in a sermon sometime soon, because like you say, it's not very popular these days. A lot of people doubt it a bit, and I certainly would be curious as to why you think that. That is, that we're on the cusp of a good time, resurgence or whatever.
Yeah, I will. Yeah, that's a. I remember I did a sermon on that for the convention, not for our congregation, but for the convention, and I could certainly share that perspective. So thanks, Steve. We can do that.
All right, I hope you do.
Good suggestion. All right. Well, let's conclude our discussion period. Thank you for a lively and interesting discussion. I hope the message was something that was helpful.